Hey, I'm Allison Hare, and welcome to Little Left of Center, the podcast that interviews culture changers that are reshaping our world and breaking new ground. On today's episode, I sat down with Father Dennis Dorner Jr. He is a young Catholic priest in Atlanta, and boy, did we have a lot to talk about. And I found him to be down to earth, really thoughtful and thought-provoking, passionate, and above all, refreshingly authentic. And personally, it gave me so much to reconsider about Christianity and my own faith. And I'm deeply grateful for this chance to step into his world for a moment and share it with you. Please enjoy. Hello, welcome.
Thanks very much.
We have got Father Dennis Dorner Jr.
Yeah.
Father.
Since there's only one Father Dennis and the other father of mine that is Dennis, we just so sometimes I use the junior if it's something that's involved with the Archdiocese specifically, so it eases confusion.
But I'm looking at you and you're like around my age, you're younger than I am, and you've got long hair. It's mind-boggling to me that I'm calling you Father.
Yeah, it throws a lot of people off. In some ways, that's really intentional. I am big on disarming people based on appearance alone. And there's such this typical image of a priest that is, really clean cut and refined beard or if no beard at all. I mean, there was a long time where Roman Catholic priests weren't allowed to have beards. And so I kind of like to push those image stereotypes and go, no, that's not the point. It's what are we doing? What are we saying? How are we loving?
My father was raised Catholic. I was raised Protestant. My father is from Lebanon.
Okay.
And he got to meet with Father Gratz, who
Very
is
cool.
the Monsignor.
Yes.
And really liked him. And he's like, I want to go to your church. I want to go there. And so we went to church. We sat in the front row. And I look up and I see this long-haired, young father doing the homily.
Hi. Yeah.
And I'm like, wow. So I immediately started Googling you, as I'm sure probably a lot of people in your congregation do. And I was just fascinated. And I'm fascinated by the church, which is the Catholic Shrine of the Immaculate Conception in downtown Atlanta. And if you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it is the oldest church in Atlanta.
In
Is
Atlanta,
that right?
That's correct. Yeah.
Yes. It's a beautiful structure. And if you need me to put an echo on your microphone so you feel more comfortable, like preaching
fine.
in these huge churches, it's very echoey, lordy kind of thing.
I actually prefer no echo if ever possible. So yeah, no.
And so I remember looking at you, and it took me a few minutes to kind of dial in, as I'm sure is common.
Sure.
And I'm like, wow, he's got a really powerful message.
Thanks.
And you're a great speaker. And when I started the podcast, I had this idea that I wanted to interview religious leaders because, and not necessarily on the doctrine of what they preach, but how they're able to communicate and move a community. That what a power, what a gift to be able to do. And then as I started preparing for this interview, and I was so excited, I couldn't sleep. And I just had so many questions because of my own questions over religion.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
So I'm so grateful to have you here. I'm so interested for so many reasons, and I thank you for being here. But I'd love to know, how in the world did you get here? What did faith look like growing up in your household?
I grew up in a typical Catholic family. We used to go to Mass every Sunday. There's 4 siblings in my or 4 kids in my family. There's 2 boys and 2 girls. It was a typical Catholic family. We went to Catholic schools for a decent number of years. But Mass was always a staple. That was just kind of one of those things that always was there. And even when I went off to college, I made it to Mass every week. In fact, I used to bring my friends with me to come to Mass. Why? It's not that I loved that church so much. It's not that I was really fond of the priest. In fact, I can't even tell you the priest that was there at the time. But there was something about recentering yourself with Mass every single week that I was like, you're encountering God. You're meeting the divine once a week. And no matter what, when you do that, it's an opportunity to kind of look back at yourself, and it's a spiritual looking in the mirror. Where am I? What am I doing? Am I moving based on my own wants? Am I doing what's best for me? And that knowledge has always been very strong in me in terms of knowing that there is a God and having faith that there's a God.
How did you know? When did you know?
Yeah, I you know what, that actual moment of true recollection, I remember going on a number of different retreats when I was in high school and being incredibly moved by those retreats. And I was seeing my peers and they're just kind of like, this sucks. And I'm like, yeah, the retreat kind of sucks, but like you're encountering God, like that's a good thing. And so I was always able to look past the mediocrity of the presentation because the divine is so much bigger than that.
You seem to have such a strong conviction. Then
Yeah.
why you? Why not everybody?
I don't know.
Why you?
Why me? Honestly, I can think of a lot of people who would probably be better suited to it, but there's just this sense of calling. I remember, I wasn't always, I would lived in the real world beforehand. I was a restaurant person from the time that I was 15 into my early 20s. I didn't get out of that until I realized, like, I'm never going to have a healthy relationship in terms of dating and just my hours were weird. And I was a workaholic as it was. My work was always my life. And that had an impact on relationships as well. And so I was like, come on, what are you doing? I got into banking to get out of that. And
why banking?
It's funny. I was working the bar one night, and there were a couple execs that came in, and my brother-in-law was already working for Bank of America at the time, and I was like, you know what? I can. This is horrible. I can do what John does. Not meaning like that John was a lacking person, but just like I recognize that I could talk to people too. I could do sales. It's not a problem for me. And so having these guys there that night, I fed them lots of drinks and took good care of them because I knew that they worked for the bank. And I actually got them set up with a hotel that was back behind. And it ended up getting me an interview. I came back the next day, brought them my resume. I polished it up that night after I had gone home from my bar shift. And I was like, I got to get out of this. And I ended up working in interviews, and I did sales for about 6 months as a personal banker. And then I got moved up into management. And I was an assistant bank manager and focusing on operations, which is not my wheelhouse at all. But I was able to train people very well into how do you sell? How do you motivate people? How do you engage the human person? How do you listen for what people actually need? Not to sell them credit cards that they didn't need, but if there's a family that's constantly overdrawing their checking account, like get them a savings account and put $100 or $200 in there so that they have that cushion. Then you get an additional account. You make it worthwhile. And so like I could believe in what we were doing if I was doing the right thing. Unfortunately, I was serving in a really affluent part of Atlanta, and so like the mortgages wasn't a problem at the time because I was in Alpharetta, and so that's when Alpharetta was booming and Johns Creek was becoming what it is. So I had enough of the sales and the money part of it, and I realized like there was something missing, and so I got back involved with youth ministry at the time. And doing that youth ministry, I was like, this is what feeds my soul. This is what, not that I like teenagers. Teenagers are really challenging, is a nice way of putting it. And honestly, it's the most dormant ministry that you do. You're planting seeds and hoping that sometime, at some point, those will take root. Because a teenager will look at you and you'll go, why did you do that? And they will look at you and say, I don't know. And they are not lying. Their frontal cortex is not fully developed yet. Like that frontal lobe is not fully matured. And so they honestly don't know. That decision-making center isn't there. And so it's a hard ministry. But the ability to be there for families when the family was struggling, to be able to listen to these kids when they were struggling. I had a nonverbal kiddo who was actually older. He was like 19, but developmentally he was behind because he was nonverbal. But he used computers. And so I was able to talk to that guy by way of instant messenger. And that was where the beginning of technology to minister really took root for me. There are plenty of people who can't communicate that way. And so that idea of digital media, and this was in the early 2000s. So internet was just kind of becoming what it is now. And but it's interesting. And so I at that point, one day I was having breakfast with my dad, and I was working at the bank, and I was doing really well. I was getting awards for being a top performer. I was making the money that I wanted to be making for the first time in my life. But I was restless. And my dad looked at me and he goes, you know why you're restless? Because he knew I was discerning a vocation of the priesthood. I'd started thinking about it when I was 17 and was like, wow. Oh, hell no. And I pushed it away. And so at this point, I'm 25 years old, and I'm like, I don't want to deal with what you're saying. I don't. Ultimately, I ended up having a really beautiful conversation with Archbishop Gregory. He invited me and sat down with me, and he's no longer in Atlanta. He just got moved to Washington, D.C. But at the end of our conversation, and where he let me air my grievances with the institutional church, and we talked about love and relationship and all kinds of other great things, He said, "You're the kind of troublemaker I'm looking for. Would you be one of my priests?" And it was like the voice of God asking me that. Not that my bishop was a god, but it was like God was working through him in that moment. I was like,
When he said
all
troublemaker, did you get what he meant? Because it sounds
Oh,
like
yeah.
somebody who's going to disrupt or breathe life
Very much
into
so.
a church that...
We talked about it after the fact, and he was like, "It's that prophetic troublemaker." I mean, he did call me Menace because my name is Dennis, but he also always stood behind me when I had something to say that was important, and he never told me to stop fighting, you know. And I think that was always important. So yeah, it empowered me a lot, and I was appreciative of his support in that.
Did it feel like when it's like the take the road less traveled.
Sure.
Did it feel like you were veering away from a common path that people understood to continuously going against the grain to something? It sounds like you were dialed in from the start.
Yeah.
But what did that feel like, kind of veering off? Or did you have people that were just scratching their head going, wait, dude, do you know what this means?
Well, yeah, actually, I lost a lot of friends along the way because my life changed, my priorities changed. Did I change? No. The friends that stuck around will testify to that. You know, they might have said you got a little weird for a little while, but honestly, you're going through this. It is true conversion, and I've said this before. Conversion isn't a singular moment. It's not like you become this person instantly. It's a series of moments tied together with grace, and so I saw this change, and that continues to this day in who I am. I didn't like seminary. I did not like.
Is that normal to not like seminary?
I think anybody who likes seminary, they're kind of weird. But like, no, I think I don't know if anybody struggled with it as much as I did, but I knew, and that's not a fair thing. I mean, I can't say like, oh, I hated seminary worse than anybody did. I think I was more vocal about it with my peers and with my parents, my dad particularly, because my dad is a deacon.
Is a deacon, right?
Yes, he was ordained. Oh, gosh, I should know this number better. I could figure it out. At least 15 years ago, I think. I think it was his 15th anniversary recently, which is huge. But he knew formation. He's like, I'm not going to pretend to know what seminary is like. He said, I know how difficult my formation was. And it was at such a shorter period of time than yours was.
And formation is
going off to seminary. And so you move away because essentially there's no seminaries in Atlanta that are Catholic seminaries. There are places where Catholics can go and study, but to go to a Roman Catholic seminary, you typically have to leave Georgia. Actually, you definitely have to leave Georgia. And so Archbishop Gregory had studied in Chicago, and so he sent me to Chicago. I did my undergraduate at Loyola University Chicago. Even though I had started my time in college at Georgia College in Milledgeville, I did not graduate from there, and that's another story altogether. But so I had to go back and get an undergrad, and I did that in the course of 3 years. And then I did my graduate studies at the 4-year program. And so, but you have to go away. And so I was in Chicago during the school year, which is like the coldest time of the year in Chicago. Yeah. And I don't know anybody in Chicago. I mean, it's a great city, but like it was not home. The food was different. The people are different. It's a different place. It was a very awesome Catholic witness for me because of the diversity of the church up there. I'm thankful for that. But it was incredibly disarming or not disarming, but it was hard to palate being an outsider, being not from there. And I went through the Chicago program the whole time, so I got treated like a Chicagoan, even though I was an outsider. And so it was hard at times for me. And so it was, so seminary was challenging. Academically, it was incredibly rigorous. You know, the number of assignments that we have. And I'm talking at least like you're looking at 200 pages of reading a week, in addition to.
Are these biblical readings? Because that's a whole other thing.
It's not just scripture, right? In fact, scripture is probably one of the smaller portions that we study in seminary. You get a good amount of scripture study, but you're talking about church history. There's 4 pillars, so it's human formation, intellectual formation, there's spiritual formation, and then there's pastoral formation in terms of how do you serve the people that you're called to. And so you'd have an apostolate, you'd have your classes that you're taking, you've got mass every day, you're in the chapel praying at 7:00 in the morning. And then on top of that, I'm incredibly ADD. And so like to sit and learn to be able to sit and read for those periods of time was really challenging. The academics themselves, that wasn't hard, but just to learn to attain the focus. And so I was really not in my element. I had dropped out of college. I was going to run restaurants, and then I got into banking, and I didn't need a degree. I could do it based on merit. And so it was just very different for me. And then I got to the priesthood, and it was like, awesome, here I am.
Really? So you felt home there?
I felt comfortable in the role of priest right from the first. It's like, this is why I have faith. This is who God made me to be. It doesn't mean that I love the climate of the Catholic Church right now. I think that things are incredibly divisive based on the political climate that we're in right now as well. And that makes it very hard because people too tightly align politics with religion, and they should be incredibly separate. The reason they need to be separate is that it allows religion to have an influence and to weigh in, not on one party, but on either party, to allow us to be a greater witness ourselves. And so we gave up that freedom, unfortunately. And so we've got some great confusion. People don't know what's actually church teaching and what is almost... I would say tribal in its mentality, that we stick together as a team rather than one human family altogether.
That's probably a great way to put it. And I'm wondering how, with all the controversy that's going on with the Catholic Church and the Catholic faith, what is your mission in this time? What is your mission?
My mission is to allow people to understand not only the goodness of God, but let's not limit let's not put limitations on God. If we're dealing with the divine, we're talking about, it could be many different things. There is a teaching within the church that even states that Christ opened the gates of heaven for all people, for all humanity, not just for Catholics. So this elitism that I'm seeing kind of spur up in different communities, it's unhealthy, and it's actually contrary to the church. The Christian doesn't know a stranger. We're called to love. And to be accepting and to be welcoming and to be nurturing. And the hallmark of that is our hospitality, the way that we encounter the stranger, meaning that they are brother or sister or whoever it is, no matter what they believe, no matter who they love, any of those things. Because otherwise you're making this assumption that you're some perfect being, which isn't true. All of us are flawed in our own way. And so my mission is to get people to Jesus and to get out of the way. To allow them to realize that there's a community that is loving and accepting. I give retreats all over to different groups, but predominantly to married couples that are in the diaconate, which is the married clergy within the Roman Catholic Church. They're not priests. They're deacons. They can't celebrate Mass. They match, hatch, and dispatch. They do baptisms, weddings, and funerals, and they do lots of pastoral work as well. But that's the group that I work on. It's usually for deacons and wives, and I try to explain to them that this idea of being closed off is not welcoming, and that I wish that every diocese, meaning juridical, meaning that there's a territory of the church. So there's two in Georgia, Atlanta, and Savannah. But the region that you're serving, that there was a warm welcome, like a soft landing place. Not only for those people who were just looking for church originally, but those who have been wounded by the church by way of abuse, by way of bad teaching, by way of just closed-mindedness, and to let them know that they are loved and that they're welcome.
One of the things that I noticed about the Catholic Shrine specifically is that my husband and I wanted to get married outside. And in the Catholic faith, you cannot do that. My husband is Catholic. It was important for his parents for us to marry in the Catholic faith. And we were happy to do that. And we called around and no church would allow us. And they said, call Catholic Shrine. And they did. And so we ended up marrying and exchanging our vows in the church, and a deacon came out and married us in front of, our friends and family outside the next day.
Yeah.
And it was almost like the portal or the entryway of, this makes sense to me.
Sure.
We became members of the church, and, I know you guys have a float every year in the Pride Parade, which I could not be more proud of. And the work you do with the homeless, the inclusivity that you do is really astounding, because there are homeless people all around this beautiful, huge church in downtown Atlanta, and have soup kitchens for them, and have done amazing things. And what you said was really around inclusivity.
Oh, absolutely.
And one of the things that I wondered, I was listening to, I don't know if you've heard this, but it's a podcast called Startup. and they had one on church planting. Did you hear it?
I have not heard that particular episode.
So good. It's actually a series of episodes.
Okay.
It was fascinating. And they showed that they talked about obviously how difficult it is to plant churches. And so many of the churches, while the people that are running it may want to marry gay couples, they cannot because of some of the doctrine or some of the funding or some of the associations.
What a sacrament is within the Catholic Church.
Yes.
Yeah.
This one wasn't particularly in Catholic, but they said out of all of the churches that a lot of churches are moving, like if you go around Atlanta, you'll see a lot of LGBTQ is welcome you here and a lot of the banners, which I love to see. But they said that the only churches that are showing growth are the ones that are extremely conservative and very purist to that. And it just boggles my mind that it does not seem, it seems more exclusive is growing. And I wondered if I'm speaking out of school or what your thoughts are on that.
I think it depends on region and things like that. It's a tricky thing with church teaching. As of right now, marriage is between a man and a woman. But in terms of also who is welcome to come to Mass, anybody's welcome to come to Mass. And if this is in fact a baptized Catholic individual, that it's within the heart of the recipient, whether they are to receive the Eucharist and be present there. But the thing is that we want them to know that they're welcome to be a part of the community, that they have a home in that. I don't know about other denominations within the Atlanta downtown area in terms of growth and things like that. I would say though,
this
it's
is
interesting.
nationally,
right?
in churches, yeah,
sure,
yeah.
And it's so different. It depends on what's going on within each diocese as far as growth and things like that. But I would say that the vibrancy of some of these churches, in terms of our parish, the welcoming nature, it makes the church feel like a welcoming place. And as a parish, we are growing personally, and I think that's a really important thing that we are representing Christ in that way, to allow people to know, come here, be healed here, realize you have a home here.
And it's a very mixed community too.
Oh yeah,
and it's
very
packed.
diverse.
It's packed. Yeah,
absolutely. The 11 o'clock Mass, any given Sunday, I'm just come to the 11. If you want to feel fed, come and be a part of that. And we brought 14 people into the church this last Easter. They go through the RCIA program, which is the Rite of Christian Initiation for adults, meaning they receive the sacraments on the Easter Vigil, the Saturday night before Easter Sunday. And to see people coming into the church right now, despite the fact that so much has gone on and that it's a hard time to be a Catholic right now. It's a hard time to be a priest right now, for that matter. But
have you felt that personally? Do people ask you, or people that would have trusted you look at you again and say, I don't know if I feel safe?
Yeah, I recognized that when I was in seminary. Anytime I'd go down to the cathedral, you get looks if you're wearing your Roman collar and you're on, on the train. I rode the public transit everywhere in Chicago. I didn't have a car up there. You get looks. I got spat on at times, and it's dude, I wasn't even alive when some of these things were going on. And I have to be honest, the scandal when it broke in 2001, I was 21 years old. Or
which
turning 21.
Which scandal?
The initial sex scandal breaking.
There've been a lot. I gotta clarify.
1.0, unfortunately, we've had a second round with Pennsylvania in the last year. But it's that reality that I remember at that time thinking, gosh, I mean, they're not all bad. Every priest isn't bad. Now, some priests are weird, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're predatory. There's a profound lack of understanding around the psychology of pedophilia by all people, because psychologically it hasn't been a great understanding of it. This compulsion, and it's a disgusting compulsion, because what it makes the person do is something that they don't even really logically they don't want to do, but it's a craving as much as you and I crave breathing, and so it's that idea of, we'll just move them out of the parish. That doesn't work. And that never worked. But they thought it was good. They were looking at their brother and thinking, oh gosh, there's something I have to do to help this guy. Let me just move him. I'm sure there was some malice in that as well. Let's just keep hiding the secret. that is Father Bob, whatever, but I hope that wasn't the case in the majority, and if that is the case, that I hope those wounded individuals that have been hurt by the church and by those who are supposed to represent Christ, I hope that at some point they come to realize that God does love them, and that God did not do this to them, that a monster did this to them.
That is hard
it's hard
to fathom. It's hard to fathom.
It is. So that's a tough thing to live in that light and to be looked at in the same way as them. I think that's probably why I have the longer hair, the pierced ears, like I do have a different look, but that's also to overcome expectations, or those preconceived notions that people have. So
are you young for a new priest?
Shockingly not. The year that I was ordained, so I was ordained in 2013. That year, the average age of priests was 33, and I was 30. I turned 33 that year.
Wow.
The average age of guys getting ordained. And so what that means is 6 years prior to that, there were a number of men that were, 26, 27 years old that were entering into seminary, because it's a minimum of 6 years. And so I don't know what it was that was going on then. Different men come in for different reasons. It's always a calling of sense, but it's stronger in some guys than it is in others. I never want to speak for somebody else, but I think you have people that they were profoundly influenced by Gregorian chant and Pope Benedict and all of that. Me, not so much. Pope Francis has been the first pope during my lifetime that I'm like, this guy is awesome. And it's everything I've ever believed about the gospel. And he's painting outside the lines, despite what some very conservative bishops say. He is preaching the message of the gospel, and that's incredible. And he's saying, focus on your environment. If we don't even take care of the place that we live, what kind of Christian are we?
Yeah.
And so to be aware of that, it's starting with literally the foundation that we walk on and trying to reform from there going forward. I think that's admirable. And he calls things out, and I'm appreciative of his pontificate, would be the word. His serving. I'm
curious to know what it was like the very first time that you did a homily as a priest. The very first time. I mean, you have, the elder statesman, sure, Father Henry Gratz, who has been there forever and is just a pillar of the community. And being this young, new priest, what did it feel like? What was it like?
It's funny. Okay, so in the Catholic Church, you start preaching when you're a deacon, which every priest is a deacon first. And so I started preaching then. My first mass as a priest, I actually had my dad preach it because he's a deacon. And so it was like an honor. But there was this clear line, this certain moment, and this was when I was in seminary. It was a day that all of us were getting together. It was a Saturday. There were 6 of us in my class at the time. And so over the course of the summer, while we were all home from seminary, we would gather once a week, and we'd have mass, and one of the deacons would preach it, right? And so it's like you're getting preaching in front of all of your peers, and that's a little daunting. And that afternoon, I had sat there with this older lady in the hospital all afternoon because I was doing my CP. No, it wasn't CP. It was right after that. But I was sitting in the hospital with her for some reason that afternoon. And so, but I was working on my homily, and I wrote this big, long homily out, and it was crazy because I got up there, I put my iPad out, I go to read it, and I'm like, my heart is not where that is anymore. It's in what was just happening with this old lady that I was sitting with. And all of a sudden, I just let myself preach from my heart. And it was energized in a way that none of my preaching ever had been before. And it was... I connected, like I saw these guys who really didn't like listening to me most of the time, but like their heads are going, yeah, okay. Like, and you see that resonating. It's the same thing when I used to give a sales presentation. When you're making the connections, you can tell it in the body language. And so it was really cool. In that moment, I was like, all right. And I realized I'm never going to read a homily again. Like, I don't want to. I have had exceptions. So like when the scandal broke this time in a number of months ago in Pennsylvania, I had to write out a statement because honestly, I was too pissed to trust myself to preach from my heart.
Is that the one that was on your podcast?
It is, yeah.
That was really impassioned.
Thank you.
And I actually sent it to my friends, and I was like, you've got to hear this. You've got to hear this, because it was meaningful. It was
Yeah.
meaningful.
I mean, I still spoke from my heart, but I very much gave myself bumpers, so that I didn't say something that could be dismissed, so that I didn't say something that could potentially be perceived as me lessening what tragedy was taking place, but also to make sure that I was being heard, that this is not okay. And actually, it was my pastor had just gotten knee surgery, and so like I wasn't going to be preaching that weekend, and suddenly I was preaching that weekend, and so it was a lot. There was a lot riding on that. We have a lot of very wounded people at the shrine who have experienced abuse in the church itself, not obviously from us. They've come back to be healed, but some atrocities took place other places, and they found their home in Atlanta, and they found the shrine to be their real home. And so I had to be very careful that I could minister and love these people and heal these people in a way that they knew that this did matter to me. And so, yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. It was, I think it's always important to be authentic. It was one of the lines that I would hear from various professors throughout the time I was in seminary. What are we looking for? Not just witnesses of the gospel, authentic witnesses of the gospel.
Well, I wonder what it's been like you coming into the parish, and do you not prepare the homily?
Oh, no.
Or I'm not. I don't mean do you not prepare, but do you?
I never write it out.
You don't use notes.
No.
And you just speak from the heart.
Yeah. So going in, I take.
How do you prepare? Like, what do you? Is it just what comes through you? Do you channel, God through? How does it work?
No, I mean. I mean, obviously, anytime you're using a gift, that it's God working through you, right? And that's a gift of orders, as far as I'm concerned, because I didn't do this beforehand. But I'll say we know what the gospel is going to be. We know what the readings are. I mean, the lectionary is set until the second coming of Christ. It's on a rotation of 3 years. And so I know what the gospel is going to be about. And so I start reading that on Monday morning. And I read that at least once a day, every day over the course of the week. And then I take every person that I'm meeting for spiritual direction, because people come to me for spiritual direction. Any of the pastoral appointments, what people are struggling with, because what's going on in the world around us, it affects everybody differently, but similarly, in terms of heightened struggle. And, it's always on top of that, there's this, we've always got our family issues, but then like this is going on and this is affecting me. And so I'll take all of those things and I take all that stuff to prayer, and I take that stuff to meditation, and I take that stuff. Well, I don't really take it to meditation. I'm trying to clear my head out.
What is the difference between prayer and meditation?
So meditation is a scanning of self, essentially, and learning to be able to take whatever intrusions of thought come in and to just acknowledge and push them away. And that takes practice, especially for an ADD person. Like it's been crucial. And so meditation is almost an emptying, and I always do meditation before I go into prayer so that I'm not distracted during my prayer, so that I have a better focus in my prayer. Prayer, it's a conversation with God. It's not so much talking as it is listening. God knows what's in my heart, and so I take all that is in my heart, but that's more organized. It's the folded laundry rather than the hamper filled with everything strewn.
Great analogy.
And so I can take that in and present that, and then I can work with that, and I can think about, well, what does this relate to in Scripture? What does this relate to in my own life? What does this relate to? Do I have a good story? And if I don't have a story, like, how can I craft a story that will make sense? And so I could say, there's this guy, and I can share that with them. The parable is an effective tool. I'm not lying to anybody. I'm sure this guy does exist someplace. This scenario probably happened at some point. And so, but you share that, and it conveys an idea. It's a storytelling, but with a greater sense of relationship. And that's what I'm trying to bestow upon the people when I'm preaching, and honestly, the bigger the crowd, the better I do. And that's not because, that's not fair. The more responsive a crowd, the better I do. And so
you can tell when you're dialed in.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. The place it becomes electric. You start hearing the amens go off, and it's not like in a traditional like Southern Baptist black church kind of a thing. Although we get some of that too. And I'm like, that's so awesome. There was an old dude that used to sit in the front row every week and be like, hallelujah, and I'm like, all right, that's cool. He'd say it at random times. So I'm like, all right, he's right in the spirit. But But no, I love that response that if you're saying something that is visceral to someone and it evokes something within them, like you're doing it right. Like that's a good thing. God is with us both in that moment. Like that's a great thing. We are engaged. We are united. That's what prayer is supposed to be. It's about changing your own heart, not changing the hearts of others. That's the great misconception of prayer.
Say that again, because that's really powerful.
Prayer is about changing your own heart. It's about uniting yourself with others. It's not about changing how others think or act or anything else. If you struggle with how someone else acts, you need to pray for the peace to be able to accept that that's how that person is.
How do you do that? How do you find that peace? That's really, really, really big, because
it's huge.
I'm thinking, like your job is to move a community.
Yeah.
Your job is to move the congregation to do something.
Well, but I'm moving them to Christ. And so it's not like it's too hard. You meet people where they are. You listen to what they're saying. People express themselves in very what's the word I'm looking for? Nuanced ways. If someone is struggling with grief, they're going to use a lot of grief language. They don't realize it, but everything that they talk about is going to be about the absence or the omission or something that's lacking. And you hear that in them. They're not actually talking about what's missing, but you hear them carving out that, almost like scraping away from the rock and giving you the statue in the end. You just have to listen to what they're saying. And so for most people, what I'm trying to do is to listen and give them something that's going to fill that, something that's going to help them to love more, meaning accept them where they are. Realize that everybody's coming from a different place, but everybody's also carrying their own wounds. If somebody is acting out in a particular way, it means that they are trying to fill something that's not there, or something that hurt them at some point in time. A lot of what I do is psychology.
I was just about to say, because you seem very evolved, even as a male, like as males are socialized to be a certain way,
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And we can talk all day long about toxic masculinity and some of
but it's legit. And
some
it's
of the things,
yeah.
But it seems like you're almost like a comedian where your job is to notice things and kind of let that ruminate.
Yeah,
every
absolutely.
Week.
It's funny. I pull back on like improv, it's yes and. And so you're looking for what people are doing. It's funny. You're the fifth person that said that. It's like your craft is like comedy, and it is. and sometimes I can be really funny with that too, because you're grasping what people are yearning for next, and you're anticipating what it is that they need next. And so you're building an idea or an argument. Technically in logic and philosophy, it's called a syllogism. It's an argument that's made.
I'm going to have to look up all of these words and put them in the show notes.
No, you're good. Yeah. Essentially, I'm defining it. It's creating a logical argument. If A, then B. If B, then C. Therefore, A equals C. Or A, then C. And so it's being able to follow that train of thought. And so what I'm doing is building a train of thought. I'm bridging the relationship. I'm allowing people to... if someone is vile in terms of their politics, like it means that they got hurt in some way, or their self-preservation is huge. People will act nasty based out of fear or protection, fight or flight. And so what I'm trying to do is get people to a place where they don't need to feel that they need to fight or run, that they can encounter, and that they don't have to fight with their brothers and sisters. They don't have to fight with their neighbors. They don't have to. And that's hard. You watch the news for 5 minutes, you develop a mild case of Tourette's, right?
Yeah,
you start twitching and saying 4-letter words.
Every morning it happens in my house.
It's hard, right? Yeah. And I almost need to, and I've actually adopted this practice in the last 4 months. I do not check any digital anything. I don't watch the news or listen to the radio or anything until I've done my meditation and prayer first.
It's almost like your own protection or shield.
You know what? Let's give God what's best before I get polluted by the rest of the world. You know what I mean? Like that's where I'm precious. That's
such
where
a great, that's such a great thing.
Like brew some coffee, sit with God, light a candle. And then, you know what? It's okay if the day goes downhill from there, because I started at the top of the mountain.
And one of the things I noticed too is that in a lot of your homilies, you're very quick to call out hypocrisy in Christianity and Catholicism. I appreciate that. I relate to that, because I'm like, I really am trying to struggle and figure out what God means to me, what religion is. And I've largely pushed it away. And I'm like a cafeteria Christian, where I'm like, I believe in God. I don't know anything else about the rest. I believe in Jesus. I don't know anything else. And, like, so I relate, or I kind of really dial into that. But I wonder if you get pushback from your congregation when you do that, or people challenging you.
Not from my congregation. Typically, it's people who intellectualize God into a corner. And so, I'll engage in the jovial, banter back and forth. And then they start telling me that, I'm a heretic. And I'm like, actually, no, you are. And what you're professing is a heresy called Feeneyism. Like, if you want to one-up me intellectually, let me just share this with you first. You're not working within the grounds of the teachings of the church. When you start judging other Christians and that you haven't embraced them as brother or sister first to begin with, and fraternal correction goes out the door. And so the reality is I'm having to teach multiple generations what the faith actually is for the first time. In fact, that's most of what I do as a priest. It's reteaching people what the actual teaching of the church is. Because people are so quick to judge, that people are so quick to they're just nasty to each other. I mean, I don't have a better way of putting it. They're just unkind and lacking all the hallmarks of Christianity at that point.
And I understand your position is probably to love them and to forgive them and to pray for them.
Yeah.
But it's hard, when you have the reality of people that are pushing back. And I know that your church, because it is so inclusive, that you do get, pushback on that, or you get criticized, not you, but the church gets criticized for not being as I don't know, purist? No.
The word that gets used is orthodox.
Yeah.
The reality is that orthodoxy is the straight teaching of the church. Orthodontist, straight teeth. It's that straight teaching of the church. Orthopraxy is the proper practice of church. But the thing is this, there's nothing that we are doing that's out of line. We do everything by the book, and that's the only way that we can operate as a Catholic Church is if we do that. The only difference is that we're not telling people you can't be there. The only difference is that we are not excluding people from the Eucharist itself. Because someone lives a lifestyle that doesn't work for somebody else, doesn't necessarily mean that this person is either A, living a life of sin, or B, that I need to judge how they live their life. Because this is an individual, it's a child of God whom God made in his image. And that this is the person who is loved and accepted and welcome. And they need to know that that's still true within the Catholic Church. It's funny. There are some who say that we are still in the early stages of Christianity. I think that when we look at the Christianity, what it was intended to be, I think we have almost looked as if it's this small thing that doesn't have limits. If it was instituted by God, if it was a creation of God, then that means like all other things that are of the divine, it's going to flourish. It's going to grow. It's going to become bigger. It's going to be better. And that doesn't mean based on numbers. It means based on love and how we are able to truly learn to accept the differences that exist within each other. And so I know I kind of come across like hippie Jesus, but like the truth of it is like to love your neighbor, to welcome the stranger. This is all scriptural. There are traditions in the church, but there's also lots of things that the church has done that are not good. Not perfect. It's run by humans. It's going to be fallible in and of itself. There are times where we have been too quick to respond. There are times where we have not responded quickly enough. There are times where control has been overly implemented. Historically, that's a very true thing. And anytime you're implying control, it's in direct opposition to faith. And so like you weren't on the right side with that one, And so, I'm going to call out hypocrisy. And so did Christ, and I never claim to be perfect when I'm doing that. I usually will admit, some personal failure, like I am not perfect about this, but this isn't even near where we're called to be. And so that's kind of how that comes about.
And I'm wondering about, you have a very unique position to be in a role of a clergyman. Is that the right term? A priest?
A priest.
clergy is different, isn't it?
Well, clergy is the priests and the deacons and the bishops. So
Okay.
Clergy's an umbrella.
I could not. Okay.
It's so complicated.
I should
There's
really
so
do
much
some
to
studying.
it. Yeah, no, you're good. You're good.
On at least what all of it means. But as your role as a priest, as somebody who is face to face with people who are sharing their deepest, darkest,
Yeah.
You're probably very dialed into we as people on what we need. What are you seeing? What is the sentiment? What do people need? What do you know that you wish we could all know?
Okay, so actually, it's if you watch the Mr. Rogers documentary,
it's amazing,
it's
isn't
incredible.
it?
Well, and there's that one line that every good and every person I'm so botching it. I wish I had the quote in front of me, but it's that idea that we act the way that we do based on the presence or the absence of love. The absence of love being the sin that goes into the world, essentially, and that we're born into this world of where love is lacking in certain places, that people are responding. I mean, essentially, sin is a disease. If someone was unkind to me or sinful to me, and that makes me upset, and then I take it out on you. You see this with siblings all the time. Then sin is contagious. That's a very bad thing. But love is so much stronger than that. Love heals that. Love allows it to stop. So that, like, if I really love my sister and I saw my mom get yelled at and she, comes and she smacks me, like, I'm not going to hate my sister because she did that. I just know that my sister's volatile, and B, she just got in trouble. And so that's how it is. If I seek an understanding, I can love more.
It seems like context and perspective makes all the difference
everything.
For compassion.
Yeah.
And for love.
We can't be so reactive to the world around us. I mean, that's the danger of all of it. You see this in just in traffic, like just the way that people act with each other, this idea of road rage, like that shouldn't exist. Like with the way people act when you honk a horn, even if it's just to let somebody know that the light has turned green, you beep, beep, like they get angry. I didn't tell you did anything wrong. I'm trying to tell you the right way to go. Like,
my husband gets angry at a horn. I'm from New Jersey. I use it liberally.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I lived in Chicago long enough that I have no problem using a horn. But it's that reality that we're not judging each other. And you know what? I think the world is so wounded right now. And I think, unfortunately, there have been people that have preyed upon the fears that people have. And that's why politics have gotten as crazy as they have at this point.
Is there a way to correction?
Yeah, we have to have a greater love. We have to learn to reach across aisles. We need to learn to... Here's the thing, though. Right now, it's really hard. Some of the things that are being carried out are really literally, they're crimes against humanity. These are a total disregard for human rights. This is a human dignity issue, not a political issue. But because it has become aligned with politics, it's like, wow. That all being said, it means that I need to just continue that anger that I would want to direct towards another person. I need to redirect that into putting more good into the world.
So it's more of like a personal agency more than anything.
Yeah, basically. Yeah. I mean, if you see an injustice, do something more just. If you see something that's hateful, put out something that's more loving. Because there are those times where you just can't counteract and you can't convince somebody in their terminal righteousness, right? They know they're right about this. Okay, well, they're stuck. You're not. If you truly are lit on fire by the love of God, if you truly, even if it's not a God thing, if you just love humanity, I mean, that source of love is God. So like, I see a no-brainer in that one, but like some people have a hard time with God. Okay, fine. Do you believe in love? I think most people do believe in love, unless you've reduced it to be this like series of chemical whatever that takes place. But like that fades. The love of God does not. Every time I'm struggling in my ministry, I go do more service and it re-energizes me.
How do you know that for sure?
Because I almost dropped out of seminary. That's first summer that I was there. I did summer school trying to get college seminary done as quick as possible. And I was living in this rectory by myself and there was nothing. And I was just just going through like paperbacks, like nonstop. I was binging Netflix. I don't even know if Netflix was out at the time. I think it was West Wing. A buddy of mine had given me his DVDs, and like I binged through every season of it. And I was still doing all of my assignments for school and everything else. And I was just like, I'm withering on the vine. Like, why am I doing this? I had a great job. Like, I had good money. And then, I don't know, I woke up one morning. Actually, I probably didn't go to bed one night. I saw the sunrise. And I was like, I've got to do something different. And so I went and I called my vocations director. I said, I need some money. I want to do this project. And he goes, yeah, sure. What do you need? And he was great. Anytime I asked for money, he gave it to me. And I went and bought a huge camping backpack that was like, I want to say it was like a 75 liter huge. And I got a huge carafe for coffee and a big tin of rolling tobacco and a bunch of rolling papers. And I started going to the bakeries.
Oh, this sounds like hippie Jesus.
Yeah, this is totally hippie Jesus. And I would go and get old day-old bagels and like stuff like that from different bakeries. I just talked to them in the area, and I get big plastic trash bags full of like old stale bagels. But honestly, like, it was great. I started going to different people in Daily Plaza, and I'd give them a bagel and some hot coffee, and I'd roll a cigarette with them, and I just treat them like people. And there's a big community, because the church that I would go to during the summer was, it's the one down in the Loop, St. Peter in the Loop. I don't know why I couldn't remember the parish name. Beautiful Georgian marble, incredible church. There's confessionals all down the walls, and I was able to go to confession on Saturday morning, and then I could go and serve the homeless, and like, it was good. And that's what turned me back. And that's what made me alive again. And I was like, all right, this is what I got to do.
That's so profound too. It sounds like you clearly have a heart for service. I bet your dad is like so proud.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's funny. He didn't go into the diaconate until I was out of the house. I was gone. And so like, it's not like we were all like, yeah, I'm going to be a deacon one day. Oh, I'm going to be a priest one day. Like, I think everybody thought my brother was going to be the priest. He's the one who's the ER doctor up in Boston now. But like, he was the one who liked church. He's the one who was the altar server. I didn't serve a mass until I was in seminary for the first time.
Wow.
With one exception of my cousin's wedding, where there was a horrible candle fiasco. I didn't know how to light a candle or light a match. It was really, they were like cardboard matches. I couldn't figure it out. And so some lady who smoked, who was in the front row, she like came out with her lighter and like lit it. And it was kind of embarrassing, but whatever. But yeah, I didn't know how to serve the mass. I didn't know much about that. I just knew the presence of God was an important, good thing. The saint that I identify with, for anybody who's Catholic that listens, St. John the Baptist, like this guy who was off doing his own thing. He's Jesus' cousin. He's 6 months older than him. But it's this idea that he was the one who brought people to Christ initially. He had his own disciples, his own students. Discipuli is the word. It means student in Latin, and that's where the word disciple comes from. And so he had his own following, and then he recognized that he needed to go away so that Christ could begin his. So the most of John's disciples went to Christ. He was people who got people to Jesus and literally got out of the way. And so like John the Baptist is like, I don't know, I've got like a man crush on like his I dig everything that he did. Everything about him is intriguing. He second chair, but like, that's good. That's not a bad thing. It's not about me. It's about what can we do, you know? And so I really like everything about him.
I don't know if you'd agree with me on this, but I feel like there's been more of a spiritual awakening that's happening now, where people are realizing that serving others is really the key to joy, to happiness, to everything. It's not money. It's not status. It's not any of those things. It's just, how can I serve? At least maybe this is just what I fill my head with all day long is people like Seth Godin and, you know, people who live and preach that of how can I serve? And I wonder if you feel that that's true.
I think it's a true statement. I think that people, once they come to service, that they realize that. But, you know, how many people are listening to, you know, there are people that are committed to self-improvement, and then there are people that aren't. If you are committed to self-improvement, you're going to, you know, come in and encounter Seth Godin and people like that, and read his books and listen to the podcasts and do all those things. And then they will come to that understanding because they were seeking growth. The problem is so many people are completely complacent, and familiarity breeds contempt. And so that's where you get that sour Christianity. You know, I always say I struggle with cranky priests. Like, there's no reason for you to be cranky. You have more encounters with God than anybody else. Like, seriously, what's wrong with you? But like that crankiness, like it shouldn't be embodied in the authentic Christian.
What does it feel like when God is talking through you? Is it a feeling, or is it just the idea just comes?
In terms of like preaching,
Anything.
I mean,
anything.
there are times
like
like,
when
okay,
you
so
ask God a question, when you're praying for something, what does it feel like?
okay, so it's honestly, it's seeking a clarity in something more than anything else. It's not like God is, saying, well, choose the door on the left. It doesn't work like that. Free will is such an integral piece. Like there isn't, that's why I kind of like fortune tellers and all of those things. Like I don't put stock in it because it inhibits free will or it influences free will, which is not good either. To be able to act with your heart, to be able to act based on prayer and discernment is what's so significant. And so when I think there's just this energy that takes place when you're preaching and the people are connecting with you. Sometimes I'm so in the moment, like I don't know what I just preached about. I knew what I was going to preach about. I think I hit all the points that I was trying to, but some of those connection points, like I'm not as aware of them as I'd like to be. It's not autopilot at all. It's supercharged, but it's in that moment where there's a lot of adrenaline. It was 2 weeks ago, I think. I was at the Eucharistic Congress. This is a giant Catholic gathering, 30,000 Catholics-ish, at the GICC down by the airport. And I preached the opening mass that night. And I got out there and I preached. And like, it was funny. One of the other priests, he came up to me and he goes, so you just like got all like cool. You just like stand up and you just start talking. And I'm like, is that how it went? I don't know. Like, I couldn't see myself. Were you always that way?
Were you always just talking?
See, the thing is, I'm super nervous. Like I'm always nervous before mass. It's funny. I am a huge extrovert, but I'm more of like an ambivert. I'm both.
Yeah.
And because that personal time, that prayer time has become crucial to me. That interior life is important. Yeah, I think I've become a better preacher the longer I've been doing it. You preach a certain number of times. It's like anything, 10,000 hours, right? Mm-hmm. And I preach mass every day for the most part. Well, Mondays, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays, Sundays.
You really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. There's daily mass every day. And so it's at 12:10.
Look at that.
Yeah. 12:10 at the shrine. If you're on jury duty for Fulton County, just come across the street.
Right.
But that's actually, that's the intention of it. If you have to serve jury duty, that the doors are open.
Is that right?
Yeah. I've usually got like 3 or 4 lawyers most days, or people that are working. Folks from CDC, we got a decent number of our guests, the homeless population that'll come in, either to pray or to just get a relief from the heat, and I don't blame them, and so I'm glad they're there. I know most of them that come in either by face or by name, but it's an interesting mix, and so it's at 12:10. There's no music during the mass, and so like that plane is landed by 12:32, like every single time. Like I started 12:10, it's a 22-minute mass, and that's good. And so people can come in, get Jesus. They can stay as long as they want to, but then once everybody leaves, we lock the doors, and that's that.
Got Jesus.
Yeah, exactly.
So
some Jesus.
I'm curious to see, with all this stuff that's going on, how I'm sure a lot of people feel like they might have been burned from the church, from what they hear, whatever it is. How do we trust the people that are leading religious? I was talking to my mother. I was telling her that I was going to interview you. She's like, I remember church for me was the safest place you can go.
Right.
And now you don't know.
Right.
It might not be.
No, yeah, definitely.
And nothing is absolute.
I mean, the reality of the situation is I don't blame anybody who doesn't want to be Catholic. At the same time, you don't go to church to worship the priest. I don't worship the institution itself. Now, granted, I didn't take vows. I do promises because I'm a diocesan priest. It's original recipe, priesthood. And so the reality is, like, I have promises that I've made. I've taken an oath of obedience and done the profession of faith. And so, like, I have to teach what it is that the church teaches. And I think that's an important thing. It's not a bad thing at all. But at the same time, long gone are the days that Father holds up the host, the piece of bread, and he says, "Behold the Lamb of God," and like people are buying it just because Father said it. There are people that believe it. I hope there are many people that believe it. But at the same time, like, why would I believe that? The priest that told me that was abusive, or the priest that told me that was this or that. We don't put our faith in people as much as we do the family that I think that it can potentially create. But the reality is we go to worship God. We come to encounter God. We come to be changed personally. Keep in mind, prayer is not about it's about changing yourself. Prayer is about personal conversion. And so why do I go to church? Because I want to encounter God. And if you believe that, that's where you go and you get it. And if the reality is, like, you may encounter a church that it's not a great place, that it doesn't feel welcoming. That's a scriptural thing. It comes from Luke. It comes from Matthew. If you're not welcome in that town, shake the dust from your sandals and let your peace be received somewhere else. I hope that you find a church home that you receive that peace and that they receive yours. That's why the Shrine, I think, is a great place. But I hope that they have that encounter anywhere. I hope that they find that, because faith for me is, it's the operating system by which I make my decisions. I don't go to look to the catechism and go, what does the church teach? I know what the church teaches on that, but I don't make that decision based on that. It comes from a place of love. It should come from a place of love. And how do we encounter people? How do we do this or do that? And so I think that's the important thing, that we do this to be receptive to the love of God. I think that's the main reason we go to church. It's to open my heart. It's to allow myself to do that. Faith isn't a series of if-then statements. Faith is about an authentic relationship with your maker. And so, yeah, I struggle with priests too. I struggle with bad attitudes. I struggle with the crankiness and the bureaucracy. And it's a struggle. But who am I at church for? And it's for God.
How do you protect yourself from that too?
You
becoming that way,
Oh yeah, no, it's easy
just
to
having.
It could happen.
Access to everything,
Sure.
Exposed to
a
lot.
Yeah,
you're exposed to a lot of beautiful love, and you're exposed to probably the ugliest parts of people too.
Yeah, no, yeah, definitely. I think managing expectations is the greatest thing. You have to have no pride yourself. I mean, like, pride is a just debilitating thing to have in self. It fuels narcissism. It can be a great challenge, but also pride comes out of a wounded place. And so for me, I just have to accept that everyone's got their own struggle. And I don't mean that in any cliche, everyone's carrying their own burden, but it is a true thing.
True.
I mean, it's a reality that, like, everyone's family of origin is complicated. Far fewer are the families with the perfect childhood upbringing. And with the proper amount of time, attentiveness, and listening that the children deserve to grow up and truly be what they're called to be. It's funny, people will often say, oh, your dad's a deacon, that must be why you're a priest. Actually, my dad was on the road like 80% of the time growing up. We didn't get to know each other until we were adults, really. I mean, I knew who my dad was, but I didn't really know my dad. We worked kind of as prayer partners. Like, I would read something, I'd be like, this is interesting. And he'd send it to, and I'd send it to him, and he'd do the same thing for me. And so we had a shared library in that regard. But, like, I think what's really important is to kind of be growing in a way that we are to what we needed most, that we provide for other people what we identify that they need most. And I don't mean that in a codependent kind of a way. I mean that in a, like, nurturing, loving, providing way. And it doesn't mean that you need to be their primary caretaker. And initiate that love with other people. Allow other people to look out for other people. When people are so, like, self-interested, it's all self-preservation. It means that they're scared of something, that they're looking for something that was either not provided in the first place or they got taken away from them in some way. And so our job is to heal that by providing that and letting them know that you are safe, that I hope for you nothing but goodness, and I also know, like, you've got to fix you. I can't fix you. I can give you the roadmap. I can walk you through it. I can even listen and continue to help you. The only one who can help you is you. And that's a really important thing. Like, I can't have a Messiah complex, because honestly, like, I can't do anything without you.
Yeah.
And so, letting people know that, like, you're stronger than you think you are. You can do more than you ever thought possible. But we got to heal you first. You break your leg, you need a crutch, you need a cast, you need time. It's so true.
I think that right there, the time is where we fall, because we don't want to be hurt. We want to fix it.
And we want it instant.
Yeah.
Because we live in a world of instant gratification.
Yes.
We have Amazon,
yes,
right?
Yes.
Like, Yes, I
God
could go to
bless
the
Amazon.
store right now. Like I could, but
Why would I do that?
why? I mean, I get free shipping. Like,
Right.
come on. And that's unfortunately like, that is the modernity, as good as it is and as helpful as it is. It malforms us in a particular way.
I've got a burning question for you. Where do priests live? I mean, do they sleep in the altar? Is there a father frat house? I mean, what is life outside the church?
Every parish, typically, every parish is the word I'm going to use. Every church, it has what would be called a rectory, and that's the Catholic language for it. It means priest house. At the shrine, our priest house is our it's our offices, it's our classrooms, it's everything else. And so Henry and I don't live there. And so the rectory is off campus. And so it's a house. It's divided into 2 separate apartments. I've got the apartment upstairs. Henry's got the apartment downstairs.
Do you guys like hang out and watch The Bachelor or anything? Or?
No, no. I mean, we do hang out. We have meals together and things like that. I mean, we'll sit and talk and have conversations, but we don't hang and watch TV together. Yeah. Although, there's rectories that I've lived at, where like I would sit and watch, Jeopardy with the pastor every night. Like that was just what we did a couple times a week. I'd go and watch Jeopardy with him, and that was fun. My first pastor loved watching tennis. I didn't really like watching tennis, but I would do that just because like I try to do something with him. And so that was my contribution, I guess. I wanted to. It's interesting. Priests, there's this assumption that we're all the same. Like, we're as diverse as any other social group.
That's what I'm saying. Like living under the same roof with a guy who's nothing like you.
Right.
Other than the priest part. How do you, I don't know.
There's 40 years between my boss and I, right? I mean, and the reality is like, this guy was a priest before the Second Vatican Council. Like, his first mass was in Latin. And so he's watched the church just change so much. He's kind of Dumbledore, in the Harry Potter series. Like he's wise and he's experienced and he's been around and I look to him for that wisdom. He has been such an amazing pastor for me. And so like, I just kind of watch Henry more than anything else. He's, as my boss, he's a Monsignor. So he's, it's a fancy title. But he's just this very wise man. And so I learned from him to learn to watch, because I'm young and impatient is the way that I would word it best. I want to make things change. I want to make things better. I want to make things more welcoming. The reality is you can't do that with Catholics because there'd be like ecclesial whiplash. At the same time, like we could move at a speed faster than glacial. And so it's a tricky thing.
Can you be part of that change?
Well, it's a hierarchical church.
Do you have authority to?
I don't have any authority over anything. I mean, honestly, like I'm the lowest position on the totem pole in terms of like,
wow,
because I'm what the church would call a parochial vicar. I mean, when I speak, I am not speaking on behalf of the shrine. I am not speaking on behalf of the diocese. Like I do not hold the same views necessarily as them. I'm pretty sure I've stuck to church teaching completely on this one, but I mean, I'm pretty low on the totem pole. Canon law does not protect me in any way. And that's why I've had as many assignments as I have, because I haven't been a pastor yet. And so that's why I kind of moved here and there, different assignments, different
when
communities.
You say assignments, what does that mean? Like different churches?
Different churches or schools. So like I did one parish in Decatur. That was my first year. And then I got moved to another parish and I was there for 2 years. And then I moved to the school for 1 year and I was like, high school chaplaincy is not a job for me. And then I came to the shrine.
Are you going to stay at the shrine?
I hope so. Yeah, I hope so. I don't have any say over that, though. I mean, I'm obedient to a bishop.
Right.
And so the bishop says, hey, I need you here. And I've been obedient for all of these moves so far. And so.
Do you have to guest appear? Because I understand at Catholic churches, there is a shortage of priests. So.
Fortunately, we don't really have that shortage of a priesthood in the Archdiocese of Atlanta. And so there will be a time, I mean, the numbers are not sustaining based on like retirement ages and things like that. In time, if we keep the same number of parishes that we have right now, yeah, I'll be covering multiple parishes, or we'll have to get religious orders to come in.
Part of somebody who wants to become a priest and kind of can help usher them through. Does that happen?
Well, it has happened. I mean,
in your church,
there's a couple, not at the shrine itself, but like there are guys who are in seminary now who I was their youth minister beforehand. Was I a direct influence on them? I don't think so. But I do know, like with at least one of the guys, he was at my Mass of Thanksgiving, that first Mass that I got to do on my own, and so he that made him really think. He was like, oh wow, he actually stuck with it. Like he could do this, and he's only a couple years away from ordination himself now. So I think you're always a witness. I think you're always an influence. I think it's a hard thing it's a hard sell right now. I got to be honest with you. Yeah. I mean, like it's I've been a priest for 6 years. There's never been a time where the priesthood was like revered, like when Henry was a young priest, like the priest was a celebrity, like father could do no wrong. That also got us into great trouble, right? But like the priests were exalted and treated like royalty in some ways. That's not necessarily a good thing either. But this pendulum is on the far other side now. And so like automatically, like we get stares, eyes cut sometimes. And I'm not playing a victim. I think it's horrible that anyone should have to look like that, like anything that it's a tragedy that anything bad happened that would influence society in that way, that people would feel like they need to step in front of them or get between me and their child. It's heartbreaking. And it's an atrocity.
But I love that you're so strong and resolute in your own place.
Thank you. Yeah.
You do have a position of leadership when people are hurting, when people are broken, when people are confused. You get to stand in front of them and preach what's important to you. And I'm sure somewhere that's probably very gratifying too.
Absolutely. I think I ruffled feathers at other parishes that I was at before. I don't mind ruffling feathers. The gospel should stir you up. If it doesn't, there's a problem. But I think it was interesting when I got to the shrine, it was an instant fit. It worked. And so, it's consoling to be welcomed by a community. And that's exactly what I try to reciprocate to the community that I serve.
Yeah. So how can people get in touch with you?
They should come visit us at the shrine. We're downtown, and 58 M.L.K. parking. You'd park at Underground, and get your ticket stamped at the outside of the church before you head back and try to pay for it. And we cover your parking. But I mean, if you're Catholic or even if you're not, if you're just looking for God, come and check us out. I think that's the important thing, just to realize that there is a church with open doors that truly welcomes and advocates for and serves. I believe that we're doing our best to walk the walk, to walk the talk, to live out the gospel. We've been on that same plot of land since 1855. The first building was 1869, I think I want to say. And since the inception of our parish, we have been the hands of Christ to the community of downtown Atlanta. And so know that you are welcome there, and that we would love for you to be a part of it, either just to come and worship with us or to serve in some way, just to be a part of the community and realize that vibrancy of faith is still there. And that community of love is still in fact present. And just to know that we're loved. There was one thing that I did want to correct. We have our parishioners. We have a number of people that do walk in the Pride Parade. What we do as a parish itself is we have a stand and we give out water, and it's that hospitality of Christ. And I think that's one of the, it's not a correction, but it's like I want to emphasize that like we are there to particularly to be that loving witness and to welcome people to come back and to let people encounter our parishioners that say, we want you to come back, like free Catholic hugs, right? And like, that's a good thing, because so many people have been wounded by the church. And so I think that like that same idea, like that's what we try to do. And so I wanted you to kind of hear that as well. I think it's an important thing that's what we try to do at the church. We want to welcome people back and let them know that when they come there, that they're home and that they're loved.
I love what you said about, if you don't feel comfortable there, find another church, find another place where you feel comfortable. And I bet that's really important. I've been in several churches trying to find where my spot is. And I have a broadcasting degree. I love public speakers, which is why, where all of this was born out of. I get very, so dialed into the speaker and how, and the message works, but I don't necessarily feel at home.
Sure.
There, I love the message, but in certain places. So it's interesting, and I'll kind of leave you on this, that I've always said this because I feel like I'm pretty wound tight. And you know the people in church that they put their arms up
Sure.
and they close their eyes?
The charismatics. Yes.
Yes. And they're, like one day I could never imagine myself being in a position to be that free. And my goal is to be that free one day, to be that moved,
I think it's a cool thing. I think the other thing, though, is that to never try to compare yourself to somebody else. The only person that you can kind of strive to be is a better version of who you were yesterday. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think it's an awesome thing to want to be able to be
but
so
I still want to be free.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. But you know what? If you never get moved to that, that's okay. Just as long as you're growing towards that. And I think that's an important thing to know yourself too.
That's like my benchmark is like whenever I could throw my arms out.
In the Jesus hands, you're good. That's right.
Yeah, maybe one day. Well, thank you so much, Father Dennis.
Welcome.
This was great to chat with you. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. God bless you.
Thanks for listening to my chat with Father Dennis. If you'd like to learn more, I've linked info on the Catholic Shrine of the Immaculate Conception in the show notes. He also has his own podcast called Brewing, Ardor that you can check out some of his past messages. If you think this episode could be moving to someone you know, please share it. And please also consider writing a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. I read every word. As always, thank you for listening, and I'll see you next week.